Welcome back to Podcast Bozo, where week after week, three bozos teach each other new things and learn from astonishing guests, like today where we talk to Andray Domise. He's a TEDx speaker, business owner, and activist. Andray really jumped right into things with us about socialism, its common misnomers, representation, and some of its bad sides. And finally, we talked about video games and cheese. I'm your host, JJ. I'm here with Eli, our resident artist, and Corey, our transitioning drifter. Before we put our sweet lips in motion, we want to encourage you to contribute to the conversation, communicate with us over the social medias or our website, which you can find us by typing in podcastbozo.com, which is podcastbozo.com on your interwebs. Speaking of our website, please go there, donate. We'll read whatever you write in the donation message. You'll hear an example of that later in this episode. And if you're not sure what that means, donate to find out and listen to this whole episode. Please, that money goes back to production and distribution of the podcast, so thank you. All right. We're about to jump into a conversation with Andray Domise, as previously mentioned. Thanks to all those who jumped on the pregame live stream with us today. It was a lot of fun. We got some questions into the episode from that. So, yeah, hope you enjoy. All right. So, we already kind of did this, but Andray, thanks for coming on. The Bozos, which is us, are just coming off a live stream. We do like a little pregame live stream before the episode, and we just kind of like chat with some people that listen to the podcast. And usually we try to get them to like ask questions of you and things like that, but we had a pretty silly one today, so I'm not sure we got anything productive out of it necessarily, but it was fun.
I'm going to apologize, by the way, because you're going to hear like child sounds in the background. Like this is nearing the end of dinner time and almost bath time for our girls right now. So you're going to hear a lot of rambunctiousness.
That's fine. We're used to rambunctiousness, and use us as an excuse to stay out of it for as long as possible. But yeah, this is not. We had one host or one person come on, and she was like, remember Maura Quint? She came on and she was like what was it? The tax march. She was in charge of the tax march organization, and she took her call from inside her closet to avoid like all the noise of her family running. So,
yeah, I can fully relate to that.
Yeah,
and the thing is, like, there's no closet that I can hide in this house that I'm safe from them. So I fully
they will find.
I fully commiserate. I'll just slide a note under the door.
A Quiet Place Father Edition. So, Andray, we told you about us, and our listeners know about us. But do you have an elevator pitch of who you are and what you do and what your passions are? That's a tough question.
I don't like talking about myself. As a matter, I fucking hate talking about myself.
We can talk about you.
No. I prefer to not be perceived. I write for Maclean's Magazine, which is a national publication in Canada. I freelance for a few different publications, and I guess people find me on Twitter because I'm generally, when I read through books and like in my process of learning, I try to share what I learned with other people. And for some reason, people find that useful. So I guess that's generally how people find me, is the little like musings and definitions and screen caps that I drop every so often.
Yeah. So how do you, what kind of information do you find that is catchy, that people really latch onto when you're tweeting about it?
I generally find things to do with like the history of the Black radical tradition, socialist theory. I study slave history myself, so I've been studying slave history in the Caribbean for a little while now. So what I try to do is relate the history of slavery in the Caribbean to slavery in general, to capitalism, because all of them are intertwined. And it's not something that I thought other people would find interesting, but I guess they do. So that's generally what you'll find me talking about. What I usually write about with Maclean's is politics, culture, and history. And I try to interrelate the three so that we understand that, the moments in which we find ourselves are not spontaneous. They don't just happen. We don't just, like accidentally get a Donald Trump as president of the United States for 4 years. We don't accidentally get a brain-addled Joe Biden and a Vice President Kamala Harris, who, in the course of her primary, didn't even make it to the first primary. None of this stuff happens by accident. All of it is intrinsic to the system in which we inhabit. And I try to provide some perspective for people on the left, just as I've learned a lot of things in my my pathway farther and farther left, and landing with the Communist Party of Canada. I try to share some of the perspectives that I've picked up and that I've found useful with other people, and I try to bring that into my writing as well.
Nice. Yeah. So that kind of triggered a question in my head. Are you someone who believes that people are intrinsically evil then, or are you someone who believes that there is a system that causes someone to behave in an evil manner?
I think that our systems incentivize what we consider to be evil. Like I'm not like a Manichaean by any stretch of the imagination. I don't see most actions as inherently good or evil. I think that there are it's like a snowball effect. Like there are minor incentives on top of minor incentives on top of minor incentives that create major incentives to do inhumane things to other people. So I'm not a believer in, like, I'm not any kind of like determinist. I think that we have under capitalism just a perverse set of incentives as to how to behave and relate to one another.
For people who don't understand or I guess yet see the troubles with the capitalist setup, do you have like a brief overview of some of the main issues of capitalism?
I mean, from a socialist perspective, because a lot of people have like some strange ideas as to what the basis of socialism is. And I'll talk to the average person, I'll hear things like, oh, it's when the government owns everything, and it's when people don't own anything, that everything is taken away, it's nationalized, it causes people to be greedy and corrupt, yada yada yada. I hear all sorts of weird shit, and it really boils down to a couple of fundamental things: who owns the means of production, and who is able to direct an enterprise. So when we talk about like the means of production, we're not talking about, for example, like who is it that runs a railway, or who is it that runs a retailer or anything like that. I also hear some strange things where it comes to property. People think that like if you exist in a socialist system, then you don't own your own things. So somebody's going to come over and take your MacBook away, or someone's going to come over and kick you out of your house and tell you that it's now a communal property. It doesn't work like that either. What it means is where it comes to property is something that is able to produce things. So somebody's house, at least a house that you live in and that you own, is not productive property. You're not making money off of that property, or at least the idea is not to be making money off that property. It's just where you live. But if you buy some houses that you're not inhabiting, then you convert it into productive property because you're making money off of that property. That is the difference between the carrying cost, how much you're paying for the mortgage, the property taxes, etc., the cost of upkeep, the difference between that and how much you're collecting in rent. That is the production that you're making out of it. But now what you've done is take housing units away from people who need to live in a place, because generally people aren't looking to make money off of housing. They're just looking to live somewhere. If you are somebody who owns multiple properties, then yeah, something could possibly happen to your set of properties. It may be moved into the hands of, let's say, a cooperative organization that works to find housing for people that need it. If we're talking about, let's say, a retail chain, or if we're talking about, let's say, the agricultural industry, does it mean that your private farm will be taken away? No, it means more so that Bill Gates doesn't get to be the largest owner of farms in the United States. So what we're talking about is the things that actually produce value for society are collectively owned. That's what that is. If we're talking about like the actual business itself, the question becomes, well, why is it that a person who buys a McDonald's franchise but never shows their face in the actual McDonald's, why are they making all of the money? But the people who are actually keeping that McDonald's running, i.e. the people who are ringing up the orders at the cash register, the people who are in the back making food, the people who are cleaning the place up, why is it that they're making minimum wage, but the person who owns the franchise makes all the money? Under a socialist system, that would be the people who are actually working and keeping the place open. Because if your staff walks out, then you don't have a viable business. They own the means of that particular production. They actually own that McDonald's. So what it really boils down to is like, where does the power reside? And that's sort of like the entirety of human history has been a long struggle between those who work to produce and those who own, the ruling class and the working class. And it doesn't matter pretty much anywhere you go, there is always going to be a dynamic friction between those who work and those who claim to own. And that's what I try to teach people that socialism is just asking yourself the question, why is it that we, the majority of people, have to get by with so little, but those who belong to part of the ruling class own so much?
Yeah. So socialism obviously addresses that imbalance. But when you're talking about socialism and how, like, when you think about how socialism's been coined as this like something different than it really is, it's so closely tied to like this idea of like evil communist China for a lot of like very right wingers, and there's the common perception of socialism is so off from what you described right there. And you're a business guy, and you're involved in STEM programs and sales. What is your approach to rebranding socialism so that you could maybe push through that idea?
Stop being so fucking weird. That's my only suggestion. I think what happens with a lot of people who like outwardly claim the socialist mantle is that oftentimes they get so steeped in theory and so insulated within a small group of people that agree with those particular sets of theories that they forget what the average person thinks and sounds and talks like. So if somebody who is not familiar with socialism asks me like, why are you a communist? My answer is because I think that people who work for a living should own things. That's pretty much it. I asked the question, why is it that, the bartender makes below minimum wage and takes home some tips, and that the bar owner makes all the money and they don't even have to show their face there? Where if the bar staff gets up and walks out of the bar, well, then there is no bar. I mean, it's there, but who's actually going to make it work? So I think that the workers should have a say in the process, if not be able to co-own the entirety of the process. And that usually I think clicks for a lot of people when I just explain the difference between the worker and the owner, right? But along with that, like there's just a whole lot of not only is there the theory aspect, which if you put some socialist thinkers in front of people, like if you try to recommend somebody to read a book, like God forbid I should ever recommend somebody to read Das Kapital. Like I would never do it. I don't hate people like that. I would never if I wanted somebody to understand like class consciousness, I would never give them Georg Lukács. It would be like forcing them to chew sawdust. Yeah. I think you should be able to make most theory fairly accessible. You should be able to talk like a normal person. And I think that's probably my biggest criticism, is that people just get so far down the rabbit holes of theory that they forget this is not how, because we're just not brought up to think this way. This is not the way that we're raised. These are not the theories that we're taught. We're taught, classical liberalism. We're taught about the Enlightenment. We're taught about capitalism. We're taught about laissez-faire and all of that stuff. But we're not taught about how socialism works. And it took a while for it to even click for me. It didn't fully click for me until I was in my 30s, right? So that's not to put myself above anybody else. It's just, I think this process would have been a lot easier if I had been around a lot more people that just knew how to behave normal.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a big commentary about a lot of educated populations who find it hard to make their their craft accessible to people. And my dad always used to say the best accountants are the ones that can explain what they do to people. But I didn't mean for this to be a conversation about socialism. I think it'd be so funny if we just cut right into where you're explaining socialism for like a good stint and just start the podcast that way. It's just like the KoolAid man busting in and just talking about communism.
Oh yeah.
But what to elaborate on that?
Now,
I guess
KoolAid man, is KoolAid man the vessel containing the liquid, or is KoolAid man the liquid?
Whoa.
I like
I
thinking he is the liquid. That just sounds more badass.
Okay, because if he is, then why the vessel? Why a fragile vessel and hurling it at brick walls?
I'm trying to think of other examples.
Some alien technology.
I find KoolAid man to be completely paradoxical.
Could the KoolAid be his soul? Maybe.
Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. The KoolAid pitcher is the Sarks, and the KoolAid is the, I guess, what would that be? The Numa? Anyway.
I don't know what either of those things are.
This guy took sex ed.
The flesh and soul.
Yeah, I didn't take geology. Sorry. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that would really bring a new meaning to like glass half full, glass half empty.
No, I'm just thinking, like, if you're the liquid, then why would you choose the most fragile vessel possible to hurl at a brick wall and then make that your entire vocation? Just throw this thing at brick walls and see if it stands up or not.
We need
Maybe it's like a commentary on what KoolAid can do for you. You know, if a glass vessel full of KoolAid is able to smash through brick walls, your kids can do anything when they're drinking KoolAid.
Yeah.
Well, if you've seen what children are like after they've drank like quantities of juice, then yeah, you'll know that they'd be bouncing off walls too. But sorry, I didn't mean to get you caught up on this one. It was just anyway.
It's what we do. Is get caught up on specifically the KoolAid man.
He gets brought up every episode.
Yeah. Wow, that is a philosophical question for anyone listening. I'm sure you've had that one before. Have you heard some good answers?
No, I haven't. I just thought of it off the top of my head. I was just curious, like which one is which. But anyway,
so you're just naturally philosophical.
I'm 3 glasses into a bottle of wine right now, and these are the things that occur to me.
Hell yeah.
The Jordan Belfort of philosophy. Sell this pen to me. Well,
we were going to talk about representation with you, but before we move into
my
that,
least favorite subject.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Oh, I fucking hate the conversation on representation. I think representational politics is like it's a liberal sidetrack to pretty much like destroy class solidarity and to tokenize people in ways that I don't think that they necessarily expected.
I agree with that. And we don't need to get into that at all. But just aside from that, question I have is, are there political candidates out there right now that talk the talk, walk the walk, ones that you admire, any role models, and why?
If I had to pick a political role model right now, it probably would be Evo Morales, the former president of Bolivia. Somebody who came from just a rural campesino, indigenous, had a very strong labor organizing background, and the labor that he was organizing was cocoa farmers. The U.S. backed death squads in Bolivia used to just like roam the countryside and burn down cocoa farms. This is somebody who I think helped through his organizing power, sort of like return the coca leaf to the position of normality within society. And to make cocoa farmers, or to empower them to like sort of change the impression in the Western mind of the cocoa farmer from people who were being exploited into creating a product that destroyed the minds of millions of Americans into like, no, this is our this is a natural product. We've been chewing it for millennia before any of you gringo showed up. We have the right to farm this product. It belongs to us. To move from there to becoming the president of Bolivia and promising that, and this is a country, you know, not very long before he was elected. I mean, first of all, it was a military dictatorship. And as it was moving away from dictatorship to sort of like semi-democracy, I wouldn't even necessarily call it a democracy per se, but there was just like this rapacious move towards privatizing everything. And in Cochabamba, an actual riot broke out because the municipal water system was going to be privatized, and the government made it illegal to collect rainwater for drinking. You go from that sort of a predicament to getting your country out from underneath the yoke of the IMF, telling foreign companies to take a fucking hike, nationalizing your hydrocarbon and your lithium industry. I think that, you know, this is that sort of achievement in the 21st century, like that deserves a lot of credit and a lot of merit. So if there's anybody that I would say is like a political role model, that would be him. That would be Evo Morales. Aside from that, like, is there anybody in the West, or like, you know, not in the global South that I would?
Not even political, just role models in general too.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, well, I'm pretty sure. Did you say political earlier, or I think you said politician? Yeah, but that's somebody that I would look for. But you know, in the global North, I don't know. Like I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. I find that because we've been indoctrinated into such like an anti-communist set of tendencies that we can't ever actually. There's what I call asymptotic socialism, where you can only get so close to espousing what socialism is before you have to veer away from it and sort of like give concessions to the sort of like capitalist and imperialist system that we've been raised in. So the unfortunate side effect of that is that you can never really have very strong, outspoken, pro-socialist candidates. The closest you can get is like social democratic, which basically means that you want to socialize production. You want to make things more fair. You want to do things like, for example, give workers a specific amount of shares in a publicly traded company. You want to break up large monopolies. You want to give workers more labor power. You want to give, let's say, publicly funded childcare, universalized healthcare, those sorts of things, but still operating within a fundamentally capitalist system. So unfortunately, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, political wise, that would be widely known that I could say this is somebody I look up to. In general, like, who is it I look up to right now? I don't know. I do my best not to really idolize anybody. Like there are like, you know, there are political thinkers, there are academics that I think deserve a lot more credit than they get, but I'm really not in the habit of placing people on a pedestal. I'm more so in the habit of finding ways to work together with, you know, really progressive and strong-willed and strong-minded people to create solutions.
That's fair. How about outside of politics and ideals? Do you have a favorite celebrity?
Unfortunately not.
No.
I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like any celebrity off the top of my head that I really like, and I don't know. I don't really like. I don't like celebrities like that. No, I can't. Like like a music artist or like an actor or an athlete or no, not really.
I guess anyone for me. Someone who's risen I've always been a Leo fan because he's been very outspoken about environmental issues and.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah. We're on a first name basis. Excuse me. But
I don't like y'all two just be hanging out like that.
Yeah. He'll hear this episode.
He's showing up on the podcast right after you're done here. As soon as you're,
Yeah, we actually have the door locked. We can't keep him out. But
it's clawing at it always.
A new favorite of mine recently, who's kind of climbed to the top, has been Lil Nas X because of all of his like because all of these like evangelical like white moms who have been like super freaking out about his like sexuality. And then how he handles them on Twitter, it just, my girlfriend and I will sit for hours and just read his tweets. That he's such a
he's
champ.
Nice with it. Listen, you can't pick a fight with these Gen Z kids. Like Gen Z grew up on the internet. Like they, it's almost like they've had like epigenetic warfare already happen before they were even born. All right, so they came out of the womb knowing how to roast motherfuckers on the internet. You can't get in fights with them. You'll never win. So and he's just so nice with it. He's so good.
He is so good.
I feel like that comes partially because I think a lot of his initial fan base came from the fact that he was running a Nicki Minaj fan page. Yeah. So it was like, I feel like Nicki Minaj fans also have just an extra layer of depth and savagery that not a lot of other people have.
The Barbs do not care about your life. They'll tell you to go drown, right? Like they're not. They have no compassion, no remorse for anybody whatsoever. So it's like he was like, you barely adopted the internet. I was born in it.
Molded by it.
Yeah, they're a breed unto themselves, and Lil Nas X is just like you can't fuck with him. You really can't. Like anything that you could possibly say to him is not going to hurt his feelings, but he knows how to hurt yours. And as somebody who grew up in the 1980s during like the Satanic Panic, where like Tipper Gore like led a Senate panel to try to find ways to ban music that was corrupting young people's minds. Like I grew up during those times when like what's his name? Oh my God, how am I gonna? It's gonna come back to me in a second. Sorry, I've just been like coding all day and everything has flown out of my head, and it takes a little while for it to like reverse osmosis back into my head. But anyway,
it's floating around.
No, but like a bunch of
Marilyn Manson,
Frank Zappa. Oh my God, okay. Frank Zappa. Was like testifying before the Senate and just explaining why music should not be censored. Like I grew up during those times, like when people thought that if you played rock albums backwards, you were going to hear satanic lyrics. And it's just really funny to me to see the Satanic Panic boomerang back around again, and for it to come out of somebody as non-threatening as Lil Nas X.
Yeah,
and it's like, if by now, like with all of the smut and filth and just degeneracy and perversity that you find on the internet, somebody who makes a music video with the devil in it is what fucks you up. You're just not built for this. You're not built for this life. You just need to log off.
You need to log off. That should be a catchphrase. Log off, boomers.
Just log off, yeah.
But it's funny. He had one of his tweets at one point was like, they were like, Little Nas X lured your children in with Old Town Road, and now he's twerking on the devil and promoting Satanism. And then he like tweeted back, he was like, he
snapped the devil's neck in the video. How is that promoting Satanism? Basically, he's saying, like in the video, it was very clear. What he's saying is, according to you, people like me are going to go to hell. So if how did the phrase go? Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Right? Like he snaps the devil's neck and then takes his crown and puts it on his own head, which to me, that's what gave me that's what sort of recalled that imagery to mind. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Yeah. And it's like, if you spend all of your time promoting this idea that gay people are hellbound, and then a young gay man puts in a video the journey of him going to hell, then what the fuck are you complaining about? This is what you've been promoting your entire life.
Yeah,
I don't
shouldn't
get that.
You be pointing at it and being like, see? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You see what happens?
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess like people need, I don't know. People just need everything about, and this is why I don't like representational politics, because it sort of fosters this behavior that people need mass media and they need entertainment to cater to their personal tastes, desires, and ethics. And it will never do that. It's not supposed to do that. I don't think that anything that is meant for a large public is ever supposed to really cater to anybody's tastes. If you're not watching or listening to or reading something that makes you think or takes you outside of your normal comfort zones, then it's fluff. It's not. It doesn't serve any social purpose besides reinforcing your own ego. So if you're somebody that comes from an evangelical background and you watch this and it's like, this is just the natural culmination of the hatred that you've been preaching for your entire life, and I know this because I grew up in the evangelical church myself. If that's something that makes you upset, I have no idea why, because that's what your ideology is based on anyway.
Right.
What was it like for you growing up in evangelical church life?
It was, I mean, the thing is, even though we went to an evangelical church, my immediate family was not fundamentalist by any stretch. I grew up with my mom and stepdad, and they were both fairly like easygoing. I think my mom found church important because coming from a Jamaican background, like we find things like, the church in our neighborhood and family to be very important, especially because we're rural Jamaicans. We come from out in the country. So like we find sort of like the village mentality, social bonds and social cohesion very important. But I don't think that she was all that wrapped up in the dogmatism of the church. So fortunately, it didn't come home with us. But I know of a lot of people that went to, it wasn't just one church that I went to, it was a few different churches because I grew up in a few different areas. But I've known people from those churches that had, some tremendously bad experiences, ended up having to leave due to psychological trauma, etc. So what it was like for me, I don't think was half as bad as what it was like for anybody else whose parents actually bring that doctrine home with them and then force them to follow it. I think my last straw, actually, this is the point at which I couldn't reconcile going to church every week with my personal values, was going to church one Sunday, and a lady, this is when I was living in South Florida, a lady who'd gone to conversion therapy for her lesbianism and, her homosexual urges, came back to the church to explain how conversion therapy had worked for her. But it didn't make her heterosexual. She was just asexual. And the thing is, and that's that's not to take away from people who are naturally asexual, but if you have gone through the process of this quote unquote therapy, which I think is more so like traumatizing people into desexualizing themselves, if you've gone through that and the end result is that you can no longer reconcile any form of your sexuality with who you are as a person, that's just incredibly fucked up to take that away from somebody. So
it made me cringe to think about that.
Yeah, it was really tough. Watching her give that testimony to the church, I think that was my last straw. I was like, and even as a teenager, I was thinking you didn't actually fix anything. You've just traumatized this lady, and now she's espousing that process of traumatization onto other people, and I just couldn't do it anymore. When I said I wasn't going to go back to that church anymore, my family didn't exactly have a problem with it. So luckily, I've had a very supportive home structure. Even when I came out to my family and said look, I'm not straight, it was never a thing. It was just a matter of well, why did you wait so long to say something? Yeah. So I was very fortunate.
Response.
Yeah. I was very fortunate to come up in that sort of environment, but I know that a lot of people who went to churches like the ones I went to didn't have anything closely approximating that experience.
Yeah. I feel like once in a while you hear a story like yours, but the majority of it is families that don't know how to handle things they're not used to. It's a shame to watch how people in a lot of different scenarios react to things they're not used to, especially when it pertains to another human being within family.
No, and I think we're gradually not to get back on the socialist beat again, but I think this is just sort of the way that we're raised under this sort of system because I don't like talking about systems. I like naming what the system is, and the system is capitalism, right? So under this system, it incentivizes atomization. When I say atomization, what I mean by that is fragmenting, dissolving their social bonds. And so the bonds that you have with your immediate community are dissolved and reformed. You have bonds that are reformed under political ideology and under your place of employment. And I think that's ideally what is desired, is for people to have no ability to organize for themselves, to demand better for themselves, that everybody becomes just a unit of production. You wake up, you eat, shower, bathe, whatever it is that you have to do. You go to work, you put in your hours, you come home, and then you think about how you can make yourself more efficient to go back to work the next day. That's ideally what's desired. And I think a side effect of that, and well, out of the many side effects, is that we don't have the ability to form strong and healthy social bonds. One way that I would say that is true is online dating, for example. And I say this as somebody who met my fiance on Tinder. You probably hear my children running around upstairs. Like it was a Tinder success story, I guess you could say. But I've also heard, like, for every success story, I've heard a million, or no, I haven't heard a million myself, but I've heard many horror stories. And just the way that people talk to each other now, like, relationships, whether they're romantic relationships, whether they're friendships, whether they're relationships of community, etc., are no longer they're not community based. They're more transactional. So when you're finding somebody on a dating app, whether it's Tinder, OkCupid, or whatever, you're simply looking at a picture and then you're swiping one direction or the other, almost like you're online shopping or something, and you want to add something to your grocery cart or to keep it out of your grocery cart. And then from what's inside of your grocery cart, you can decide to inspect the item and decide whether it's worth your attention. Maybe you want to take it to the checkout line with you, i.e. you want to message that person, or you don't. And you take it out of the cart. Like, everything has just become so transactionalized. I hear this thing. I read a New York Times article about the friendships that you want to take with you out of the pandemic. Like, so when everything opens up again and you begin reforming those social bonds, because we've all been locked down and inside of our homes for the most part, what sort of friend circle do you want to have around you? And they were pointing out facts like, people who are obese or people whose friend circle are obese are likely to be obese. People whose friend circle are unemployed are also likely to be unemployed. And it's like, what the fuck are you saying? So you're basically saying that, like, people should, on the basis of becoming the kind of person that is ideally suited to this social environment. Because if you are quote unquote fit, then you're also healthy. You're not going to take many sick days off. You're not going to file as much for insurance. You're going to show up on time. You're going to be at work. Your mind is going to be on work. Like, we have this the idea that people are supposed to optimize themselves in order to best fit the way that the system functions, when it should be the other way around. Like, there's more of us than there are of you. Whatever fucking system we have ought to be a system that works for us. I don't like the idea of me having to mold myself to fit expectations of what this system is, that incentivizes, like I said, like, gives you many perverse incentives to cheat others, to get ahead, to throw away members of your community, to dissolve those social bonds, to isolate yourself. But that's how we now form romantic relationships, and I think that is entirely encapsulated in the way that we use dating apps.
Yeah.
How do you think?
Oh, go ahead.
How do you think the internet kind of plays into all this? Because obviously, like, it's so good at bringing people together, but it just kind of like the points that you made at the end of that about just communities and how they're breaking down based off of kind of the ideals of the capitalist system. Like, within web communities, internet online communities, like, there's not necessarily the accountability that you hold with in-person interaction yet. Like, I mean, I think it's becoming more and more like real every day. Like, web communities are really important to people and to learning and to kind of like social interaction, even though it's completely faceless.
I don't know that you can really have any such thing as a web community. You can have forums, you can have scenes. I don't know that you can actually build a community online. Like, I'm still not convinced about that. Maybe I'm showing my age. And maybe people are going to completely disagree with that, but
log off, boomer.
No, I honestly do think that because, like I said, everything is transactional, right? So what people sometimes think of as quote unquote cancel culture, I think more so falls under the realm of disposability. So you're in a web-based community online, and then somebody gets into an argument or some sort of interpersonal conflict with somebody else. And because we've been taught to like gin up everything that happens to us and to catastrophize it and make it like exponentially larger than it actually is, because we've also been taught to like medicalize everything, even though we're not medical professionals ourselves, and like translate that into the entire world of psychology, medicalization, etc. We bring in words like PTSD, we bring in words like trauma, when it's like, you know, and I watched this happen like 9 times out of 10 when I see some sort of social quote unquote community fall apart that's web based, I'll see words like gaslighting, I'll see words like trauma, I'll see words like abuse, I'll see words like PTSD, so on and so on and so on. And when you actually find out what it was that 2 people had an argument and now they don't like each other. But because that sounds like a very petty reason to dissolve a relationship or to break a community apart or to try to get the rest of your community to ostracize that one person, everything has to rise to the level of gaslighting, abuse, trauma, PTSD, so on and so on. And it makes it very easy to turn those relationships transactional, i.e. I put something into this group, I develop a certain amount of social credibility, social capital. What I take from this group is my ability to function independently as a human being. What I'm putting into this group is that I am providing to you the benefit of being my friend. That if you're no longer my friend, you no longer have the benefit of being my friend, but you also shouldn't have a community either. So I think that there's like layers to it. I think we tend to fold all of that into this, like, we chew it down into this bowl that's called a cancel culture, and I think that's absolute bullshit, because it doesn't function the same for example, like celebrities. It doesn't function the same for politicians as it does for the average person. And I don't consider that cancellation. I think a lot of the times it's people, because we have very little ability to contextualize things in terms of face-to-face interactions and meaningful relationships. It's all digitally based. Because we come by these relationships easy, it's also easy to get rid of those relationships. But I think, like, personally, I think that that's sort of what the internet has brought to the realm of community and interpersonal relationships, is that because it so easily transactionalizes those relationships, then it's very easy to be checked out.
That almost brings you back to that that statement you were saying before, where like people are kind of deprived of understanding how to conduct regular relationships due to like the rat race that everyone's caught up in growth and things like that, because it's like people have this inability to just disagree, and it's the polarization of politics too, probably a little bit in there, but the ability to just disagree. It's not even just that, but it also affects our offline behaviors. Like I was reading where did I see this? I was reading a paper about a year or so back, and it was talking about the Facebook effect. That is, if somebody goes to a social function, they will actually now change their behaviors, predicated on the notion that whatever behavior they're engaged in will be captured and broadcast on the internet. So, for example, if somebody is at a party, they will not have a drink in their hand. So if somebody like comes to take a picture of a group of people, people will put down the alcohol or will just go the night without drinking altogether, because they don't want other people on the internet to see them with that alcohol in their hand, for very good reasons. I mean, you could, let's say, go to a workplace that is, you know, like a little bit more like buttoned up and conservative, and you're not going to be seen at a party with a joint in your hand, because if somebody at work sees that, you could come back to work. You know, you go to the party on Friday, you come back to work on Monday, and you're getting your walking papers because you were engaged in illicit behavior, right? So it's not just a matter of like it.
wrecks or makes it easy. I shouldn't say it wrecks relationships, but it sort of like makes those social bonds more fragile, but it also changes our behavior to steer us towards conformist type of behavior. So it's not just a matter of like, I don't want to be on the outs with my workplace. I don't want to be ostracized in my workplace. I don't want to be ostracized anywhere, period. So I'm going to pattern my behavior in such a way that's going to make the social groups that I'm a part of more comfortable with me. And I think that and this is, tying that back into representational politics. That's why I fucking hate it, because I think that's just one more layer on it. The idea that people have to be represented. How can I put this? The idea that people should see themselves in mass media, I don't think is a bad idea. The problem I have is that if that becomes the be-all, end-all of that transaction, it poses a problem. Because now, let's say that you want to see more Black representation in film, for example. Blackness is inherently anti-system. Like the system, the capitalist and imperialist system is designed to visit violence on Black people. So as a Black person in film, if on the one hand, film has to conform to whatever the social mores are, it has to be consumable by the most amount of people, it has to be non-threatening to people, then a Black person in a particular film, also by nature of the medium that they're appearing in, also has to be non-threatening. And in many cases, will reify the most harmful aspects of that system. So to give an example, Black Panther. Like people, I liked the movie Black Panther. I thought it was a lot of fun. I actually helped raise a bunch of money to take kids to theater to watch it during its opening weekend. Like it was a hell of a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it as an entertainment product. But drilling down into like what is the subtext of that film? Well, it was a film that reified imperialist tendencies. That is, the CIA agent Everett Ross that enters Wakanda becomes like a trusted ally, whereas we know that the CIA in Africa is responsible for the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, is responsible for the overthrow of multiple states. We had this idea of Killmonger as this like violent fake revolutionary who was just interested in killing people, but what does it mean for a society to leave someone behind? That is, Killmonger was sort of like abandoned by Wakandans or abandoned by King T'Chaka and left to raise himself in the United States. And then when he returns to Wakanda, he's treated like an outsider. None of this is an accident. These are just tendencies that we're raised in. So what does it mean to have representational politics in film if the representation would strip you of your agency and strip you of your counter, your natural tendency to buck against the system and to go along with it and to reinforce it? So I think that to tie this all together, the way that the internet has really fucking ruined us is that it doesn't the communities that we sift ourselves into don't offer a lot of room for discomfort, for conflict, and for friction. Like the normal vicissitudes of human existence are smoothed over by the way that we sift ourselves into communities on the internet. And as a byproduct of that, we can't tolerate any friction whatsoever. And I think deep down we know that we're supposed to rub off each other's rough edges. We know that, just as a facet of being a human being existing in society, you're going to encounter people that you don't like. You're going to encounter people that you like but piss you off, and you're going to have to find ways to get along. And I think one of the ways that internet and particularly social media has stripped us of our ability to do that is that the slightest discomfort that we experience, we then take that as a reason to try and get rid of the thing or the people that make us uncomfortable.
Do you not think that can happen in person? Point. I mean, I feel like
it's a lot less easy for it to happen in person.
You can't just
if you have to see the same people if you got to see the same people every day. I'll put it like this. My family comes from a small, used to be small, but it's getting a lot bigger now. But it was a small parish in Jamaica. Now, our parish was like on the eastern side. It encapsulates like Moortown, Islington, etc. But where I come from, where my family comes from, which is Portland, Jamaica. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody generally knows everybody's business. Now, it's funny because I happen to be a very private person, and I think you'd find that most people from like rural areas of Jamaica are very private people, but we do share things with each other. We share family ties. So you'll have somebody that is not related to you by blood in any way whatsoever, and you'll call them your aunt, your uncle, or your cousin, right? So like there's still a fictive community-based kinship. And when you have to see and encounter the same people day in and day out, you find ways to actually deal with each other. And if that means that, the toxic and negative behaviors that might come out in you, you learn to stash that. You learn to like act as if, there's a danger to you if you're exhibiting these toxic and dangerous behaviors inside of that group. But the flip side of that is that you're also forced to deal with people. Like, you're going to deal with people as they are, not as you wish them to be. So there are people that my grandmother has known, for example, for for as long as she's been alive, just decades and decades and decades. And then their children are friends with my mom, my aunts, etc. Their grandchildren are known to me. We're in the same WhatsApp chats and so on. We disagree on a lot of things, but even if we disagree, or even if we're at loggerheads on something, we find ways to work it out because we're part of a community together. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that social media and the internet has taken away, is that you can't find ways to deal with people, so then you just try to remove them.
Right. It's just it's a factor of just like the functionality of being on an online group is that you could just leave or kick someone out, making it so easy to play God in that social situation. Whereas like
you kick them out of the group chat, you block them, and then you never have to deal with them again, right?
Yeah, it's someone you never had really a tie to in the first place, and so that makes sense. Do
you think people having the agency to do that for themselves is a bad thing? I mean, I've something I've noticed recently, or just at least heard more of recently. Granted, it's probably just the people I've been around, but my relationship with my family is great. I have met some people recently who have not had the same experience, and so their view on their family, which I would view as my community, is different in the sense that they're very, very, very willing to distance themselves, to step away, to say, I don't want to be near them. I don't need to be near them. It's not a good place. Do you think, is that not the same thing?
Not exactly, because there's also found communities. So I'll give you an example. Like, there was a member of my family that worked in a group home, and I was often around that group home, or I was often in that group home, right? So when somebody has to, say, leave their family because their parents are violently abusive or sexually abusive, or because they might be LGBTQ and their family is completely intolerant of that, then you have to leave. Like, you obviously can't stay in a situation that's not safe for you. But one of the reasons that we have, for example, like the Village in Toronto, and we have villages in many cities, is that people they congregate in communities where they have things in common, and that there's safety in numbers. And I guess, like, there's a certain level of understanding that you gain being part of that community. I'll give an example, like being part of the LGBTQ community. As somebody who's in my 40s, it's a lot different than being part of the LGBTQ community as somebody in their like late teens and early 20s. And I find this to be true because the way that I see that young queer people will talk about things like kink at Pride, like whether kink is allowable at Pride, or problematic conversations like age gaps, which I'm for the most part agnostic on. The way they'll have conversations on the way that people should act or like behave in public, wanting things like, or finding like, polyamorous relationships to be completely beyond the pale, or even like being transphobic. These are things that for the most part, in the 1980s, 90s, and I would even say like the early 2000s, in my experience, were almost unthinkable, because you couldn't just catapult entire groups of people out of your community, for no reason, because, you find them to be a little bit too weird for you. Like, it just wasn't a thing that you had to be in the community together because there was safety in numbers. So even if like in your immediate, like most, I guess, like convenient or inherited social circle, there was no place for you, or it was dangerous for you to be there, you could find other circles to be in. But what I'm saying is that even like wherever you find, like whatever circle you find yourself in, that is the safest for you to be in. Now it's very easy to leave a group and try to find another group, but along with the convenience of that comes the very fragile social bonds and the ease with which people are able to either themselves just get away from that group and go find another one, or to expel members from that group. So that's something that I find a little bit, I don't know. I guess like when I see people have conversations about like, for example, like older gay men who have relationships with younger gay men. Like a man in his 40s might be in a relationship with somebody in their 20s, and people find that incredibly problematic. I'm just like, that was just the reality of things, because an entire fucking age cohort died out during the AIDS crisis in the 1980s and 90s. So what was the dating pool? Like, there's only so many % of people that are gay to begin with. Your dating pool was just whoever you found. And right. Now that we're in a social context that is completely removed from that, or at least has, like, I think, sort of fallen out of the public memory for a lot of younger people, they can't understand those relationships, so they find them to be problematic, and then will like sort of like weaponize their distaste for that against older gay men. You know what I mean? That's right. The sort of thing where like I find that internet culture has replaced those social bonds, whereas like if you grew up in and around that community, you would know why there are like gaps in age for a lot of like same-sex relationships. And being part of that community forces you to learn those things, because you don't have the community memory. The memory of the LGBTQ community is not passed down to you through your family. It's passed down to you by being a part of that community. Like, somebody has to put you up on that knowledge. You have to go seek it out for yourself. Mm-hmm. But because it's just very easy now to find online communities where you can sort of like create like a community mythos, or just say the same things to each other and not necessarily have to learn anything, then the people that don't belong to your social circle or your scene, the people who are in the out group, you can just say whatever you want about them. So I see what you're saying, but by the same token, like, there is, I think, an advantage that having those intimate and face-to-face relationships, those close relationships, there's an advantage to that, because you are forced to learn things about other people, and you're forced to reconcile that with yourself. If it works for you, it works, and if it doesn't, then you may have to go. If it's a harmful place. But I think what happens is when you have strong interpersonal relationships with people that you actually know, that have like come over to your house, that have broken bread with you, that you've gone out with, and so on. You learn to have better communication with people, so that the things that they might say or do that make you uncomfortable, you can actually like voice that to them, or they have the same comfort voicing to you the things that you've done that make them feel uncomfortable or make them feel unsafe or whatever, and you're able to reconcile the relationship that way. But I find a lot of the times online, because especially in like formats like Twitter, where you are forced to communicate your thoughts in 240 character messages, like little snippets of your consciousness, that the most inflammatory thing that you can possibly say is the one that you're incentivized to say to people. And that's, I think, what helps break up those social ties.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Man, how did we even get here?
Can you still hear us? You froze for a second. All right, there we go. We're back, I think.
Yeah.
No, it made a lot of sense how we did get there. It makes me I don't know. I guess my feelings are torn because like you have so much access to communities that you may not have had access to before. So to say that like the internet is fully bad, and I know you're not saying that.
Well, I didn't say it was fully bad.
I know you're not saying that.
Yeah.
But there is definitely like there's two sides to that take, and I've never thought that deeply, I guess, necessarily. Period. No, but actually just about about internet groups and like in how that has created like this. I mean, we've talked about cancel culture on this podcast actually before, and how you kind of have this like I don't know what to call it, just like easy to press the button and just get mad at someone. Just because everything's so heated. But I had a question back a bit ago, and it was about we obviously did a lot of research into things you've done, and one of the things that we came across was your TED Talk, which is I'm sure why we all thought that you were really into representation, because that was one of the things we saw.
I should probably clarify this. I'm into healthy forms of representation, right? I'm very much not into representational politics. I think that representation is a good thing. I think it's a good thing that people are able to see themselves in the entertainment media that they consume. I think that that's a good thing. I think where it goes wrong is when you form a politics out of that. So if you're taking it past the realm of, I want to see myself in this particular, like I said, I liked the movie Black Panther. You know, if I see black superheroes, hey, that's really cool. I haven't seen aside from Blade, haven't seen a major film starring a black superhero. So this is awesome. This is forward progress. But I am not going to turn the appearance of black superheroes or black people on screen into a political project.
Right. Because
if the superficiality of it means that you never actually think into those deeper meanings, i.e. what it means to be a black person in an anti-black world, in an imperialist world, then you start to take away some very strange ideas about like how it is that black people can challenge systems. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess elaborate a little more though. I don't want to
in the TEDx talk that I did, I was talking about how it is that black people are represented in video games. So I wasn't saying that there's very little representation of black people in video games, or that there wasn't enough representation. I was saying that the kind of representation that black people tend to get in video games reinforces some harmful ideas about black people, and in fact can actually cause or inculcate people into racist ideas, right, or into racist thoughts about black people. And there was like multiple studies sort of backing that up, that, you know, people who were playing video games came away with an impression of black people as being a certain way. So even when like you have black people in games, the way that they're represented actually sort of skews the player's perception of black people as a whole, especially if they don't have a lot of contact with black people outside of entertainment media. So right. What I was hoping to get at was that we could find healthier and more constructive ways for black people to be represented in video games, and not simply stop at the fact that it's a black character in a game at all. You know what I mean?
You see that a lot. We talked about this before too, with Hispanic characters too, and how they're like, if you think of like the GTA, the Grand Theft Auto portrayal of like a Hispanic character, and how they always have like a very stereotypical accent and have like predictable like attire and things like that, and it's just it's. And I get what you're saying. You had that sentiment in your TED Talk where you're saying, like, I want to be able to hand my daughter a video game that she can play as a playable black woman who is able to do all the things the other characters are, and not just have these stereotyped features. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you going to depth about something.
I would have a very hard time. No, my children right now are not really old enough to play. Like they do play like some kids games, and it's mostly like, you know, building blocks and ABCs and numbers and that sort of thing. They're 3 years old, and they're actually fairly proficient with no, they're they're not stealing cars and murdering people, not yet. But I wouldn't feel comfortable putting a game in their hands anytime soon, because the kind of black characters that I see in video games are not the kind that I am comfortable having them see themselves as, and there's studies showing that like young Black girls who watch mass media, not even just video games, who watch mass media, come away with a negative impression of themselves. Like they actually feel like less confident. They feel inferior to their peers. They feel inferior to white girls. They wish that they weren't Black. Like there's some very harmful and toxic like beliefs that get inculcated into young Black girls simply by dint of consuming mass media. So I really hope that we can figure something out soon. And this isn't just like getting more Black people in the room. I don't think that's necessarily what's going to solve the problem, because the people that get into the room that think that they're going to solve the problem have to fit into the culture that created the problem in the first place. And the problem is, if you think that, you just want to keep your head down and do your work, and then when you get into a senior enough position, you're going to be the one that changes the company culture. I'm sorry, but systems change people. People don't change systems. So it's not just enough for Black people to be in the room. It has to be a shift in company culture that allows creative Black people to come into, whether it's film or music or video games or wherever, to be able to tell stories in a way that actually challenges the way that system works. And I think that means that, a lot of bean counters are going to have to revise their ideas of what's going to produce a profit and what's not, what's acceptable to say in front of an audience of millions and what's not. And unfortunately, because the financial side, like the financialization of mass media, wins out 9 times out of 10 over the creative side of mass media, I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, we talked to a movie critic one time that was basically telling us about how you would be disheartened at at how Hollywood is just not this romantic place that you imagine it to be, and like a lot of people have this like romantic view of Hollywood, and like the whole story of what's his name, Sylvester Stallone, like driving on his last dollar and throwing a script at producers and like getting it pushed through production. Like it's so just not that, and it's so marketed and businessy, and it's just it's not made by this like whole hopeful whimsical process like people think it is, which plays into that.
No, it's run by a bunch of people that graduated from business school. It's not run by it's run by people who graduated from business school. It's not run by like the creatives. Yeah. It's run by CFAs. It's not run by people with MFAs.
Do you still work with the STEM program? Is that still work you do? Because you co-founded.
No, we had to. The youth coding project, and we had to shut. Like when COVID hit, that was it. That was pretty much a wrap. Yeah.
Was that so? That would be your ideal way of implementing the kind of representation that you're talking about, though, is kind of grassrooting. It's a dumb term, but like teaching people to grow up in that industry and be able to be the advocates for it themselves, rather than throwing something out there and being like, see, you got your representation.
Yeah, exactly. Like I would want to see a lot more young people like collaborating with, amongst each other, starting their own projects, developing independent projects, and not necessarily be part of the pipeline into large companies, because I think that you have to show like proof of viability. So it's going to be necessary for a lot of like the smaller creators to show that the kind of representation that challenges systems is actually, because we live in a capitalism, like there's no fucking thing that you can do about that, and whatever sells is what's going to get backing. And you have to show that narratives and stories and products and so on that challenge convention are worth backing, are worth bringing people in for. And the problem that I have now is that, like, I have a hard time even finding something to watch on Netflix or whatever, because I just see the same kinds of stories, or like they're so sanitized now. I think like the Disneyfication of mass media has been so toxic to creativity that I can't find a movie that actually challenges me. I already know how the movie is going to end. I already know the way that the story is going to go before I even start it. So it's like, I don't know, like I can't watch anything in the MCU, the Marvel Comics universe at all. Like I'm done. Like it's like it's basically just a save the cat formula. I have a hard time like tuning into new shows. I actually am looking for like older shows to watch because at least I'll get something that makes me uncomfortable or challenges me. I think that the way that we've sort of like incorporated blackness into the creative industry, especially where it comes to film, video games, I think is like there's some similarity there, but I think this is especially true in film, is that we're there to see one of two things: either horrific trauma or like power fantasy. You know, like there's either the movie Antebellum, which I absolutely fucking hated, which is supposed to be like this challenging film about modern day racism and bringing like slavery into it, and it did not work. It was just one of the worst things I've ever watched. There was a movie that was released on Amazon Prime. I forget what it was called. God, I forget the name of it because I took one look at the preview and I was like, nope, absolutely not. But it was just like this new sort of like it was supposed to be in the vein of like a Jordan Peele type of movie about a black family that moves into a white neighborhood during like the immediate pre-civil rights era. And apparently just like a lot of horrible and traumatic and gory things happens to and around this family. I'm just like, no, I'm not going to watch that. I cannot bring myself to watch this stuff because that's all we get is this trauma porn. But then on the flip side of that is these like, you know, these like movies and shows that are made for like the upper middle class black people that do one of two things: either misrepresent what life is like in working class and like lower income neighborhoods, or like reinforces, like makes them feel really, really good about themselves. Right. So like that show Blackish, I can't watch it. Like
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
No, I can't watch it. It's made for upper middle class black people that are trying to escape the hardships of blackness. Like it's just tailor made for that audience. I have a very hard time.
Did you ever watch the show Boondocks?
You know what? I liked the Boondocks when it aired, and then I liked it less over time. Because a friend of mine, T from the podcast Champagne Sharks, was so good at pointing this out, is that it does actually reinforce a lot of respectability narratives for black people. That is, like it does position most black people as being ignorant and uneducated, unable to conduct themselves socially, and that there's a certain class of black people that are enlightened, and it's their job to sort of like drag the rest of us into like respectability or civility or whatsoever. And Aaron Magruder, I think, is like the ne plus ultra of this. So I used to like it a lot, but like if you go back and watch it again, or at least if I go back and watch it again, I'm like, some of the shit is really cringe. Yeah. So I have a hard time with that now.
Did you watch that?
I've just been getting into it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking with us this long. We have a couple things that we'd like to finish up the episode with before we kind of lose your interest here. But the first thing being,
was fine. We covered a lot of ground. I was not prepared to have this broad of a conversation. Holy smokes!
Usually we have like banter at the beginning. That might be a little assumptive to say that what we do is like fun banter, but
whatever kind of banter we were having in this conversation was not fun.
Yeah, but I'm
serious shit.
Yeah, it's like we should just have like the sound of just like a air raid alarm at the beginning of this, and just like bust right into the serious topics, and then. But one thing that one of the people we'd like to give some of the questions that people on live stream asked, and one of the things that was asked was I don't even know how to ask this, but like we're three white guys, and we had an episode about representation, and and we don't have much life experience with that stuff, but we're trying to bring. I mean, I'm very aware that like when people talk about like classism and any kind of marginalized group, it's really the people marginalizing the group that it's their problem. So it's important for them to be talking about it. So that's kind of where we justify doing it. But what are your feelings on that?
Like, what are my feelings about 3 white guys talking about representation?
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know. I think that maybe representation is the wrong word to use for it. I think that white people ought to have more conversations about how best to organize other white people to create bonds of class solidarity with people that aren't white. I think that's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And I think back to this is a conversation that's actually happening a lot now, which is that that Black people or like Black activism should also include the white working class, because it's necessary to create those strong class bonds again, so that we can actually challenge, like we have the people power to challenge the system. Now, I think it is absolutely true that there does need to be class solidarity in order to challenge systems. But I don't think it's enough to say that Black people should make room in their movements for white people to create that class solidarity. I think the necessity is for white people to organize themselves, to create some sort of like broad-based, I don't want to call it social movement, but to create some sort of like organization within themselves that does take into account the fact that you are going to have to work with people who are not white in order to have that strong working class movement. That the organization has to happen inside of white communities first. I have a hard time even saying white communities, communities of people who think they're white, because I think that like the necessity is to like get rid of whiteness altogether, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. But that sort of organization, the indoctrination into ideology, the understanding of theory, the divesting of the racialized and racist behaviors that cause those frictions with people who aren't white, like that has to be worked out, and then you can organize with other people. Then you can also organize with Black folk. Then you can organize with Latinx folk. You can organize with Asian folk, other people of color. I think where the representational conversation leads me astray, or like lets me or makes me uncomfortable, is this idea that we have, like, the people who are not white. I don't like saying people of color, because like it's a very flattening term, but the rest of us have to find ways to assimilate into whiteness, such as it is for whatever like workers movement that you're able to put together. And I think that's absolute bunk. I think that each of us should be able to organize ourselves and to be able to work out those issues that are going to cause those frictions before we start talking about working together as groups, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's fair. And I appreciate you giving a good answer to a bad question. So
No, I don't think it's no, I mean, like, a lot of people would say like, oh, isn't 3 white guys talking about representation kind of a, oxymoron? It's like, no, I think white people should have these kinds of conversations. Like, you should be having conversations about how it is that you can work with Black folks, with Indigenous folks, with people of color. Like, you should be able to have those conversations. And I think it's necessary to sort of like figure out what it is that causes those social frictions, what causes people to be uncomfortable, what it is that you need to do to challenge yourselves, to be able to work together on a broad-based, whether it's like an anti-imperialist project or a decolonial project or a working class project or whatever you want to call it. But because we grew up in a white supremacist and capitalist society, there are things that you're going to have to challenge yourselves to let go. And once you're able to let those things go, then we can all work together.
Well said.
Cool.
Do you what was I going to say? What video games are you into these days?
Oh man. Lately I haven't been able to play video games very much. The last game that I really sat down and put any amount of time into was Ghost of Tsushima for PlayStation 4.
You know that?
And
I've heard of it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying it looked cool, but I've never played.
Oh, it's actually a really fun game. It was by Sucker Punch Studios, the studio that made Infamous for PlayStation. Let's see. I got Resident Evil Village, but I haven't been able to get like hardly any way into it whatsoever, just because I've been so busy lately. I've just got like a lot of stuff on my plate right now. The game that I find is just easiest to like sit down and play, like no matter how long it's been since I've picked it up, I can get back into it. It's probably Skyrim. Like I know that's just a really like basic ass answer, but it's like putting on a pair of comfortable loafers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just even stepping back into the old. Yeah.
Yeah, like The Witcher 3, I love that game so much, but the problem is if I haven't played it for a while and then I try to get back into it, I forget what I was doing. Like I forget what the goal was. I even forget like the controls, like how to actually control my character, right? How to control Geralt. I like Civ also, but like all my friends are also way too busy to be playing with me either.
That game sucks up time.
Yeah, that's a time sucker of a game.
Hey, if you all ever want to play Civ with me, you feel free to hit me up on Steam.
We will.
Yeah, I've got a big ass library of games too. Like I have more games than I'm ever actually going to be able to play in my lifetime. And the biggest disgrace, like the biggest stain on my character, is like probably 95% of the games I own have not been finished and probably won't be.
Oh man, do you finish shows?
I know. Did I finish? Sorry.
Do you finish shows? Are you one of those people that just doesn't finish anything they start? Or
if I start a show, I generally will finish it. But if it gets like if it just gradually becomes trash, I can't finish it. Like I liked Fear the Walking Dead. It actually was a better show than The Walking Dead for a little while. And in season 4 and 5, it just got so whack. And I was just like, man, I can't. I was told that season 6 is better, but I don't want to have to drag myself through the remainder of season 5 to get to season 6. There's a lot of anime series that I've been told are really good, and it's just like I can't do it. You know, like I'm really big into anime, but I'm also not big into wasting my time on garbage anime or shows that like just take forever to get to the fucking point. Can't do it. Yeah. So yeah, like I haven't been able to really. Man, what's the last show that I probably binged? The Stand on Amazon Prime. Oh, this exposes me as an Amazon Prime member. Whatever. But I watched The Stand. It was okay. I will finish shows because it requires a lot less time commitment than video games do. Look, I'm old enough to have been part of like the 8-bit days where you could sit down and play a game and finish within a few hours. Now, video games are just a commitment. Like, it's a part-time job.
It is. I mean, those games that like come out and they're like 24 hours of continuous gameplay. I'm just like, holy shit.
It's like, why? What? I have other things to do with my life. And you know, the thing is, like, I don't know how people are capable of experiencing boredom. I have no idea how it is that anybody is capable of being bored right now. There's so much to entertain ourselves with. And the problem is because there's so much, like there's just glut of entertainment, it's hard to figure out even what to entertain yourself with. And when you pace yourself and like try to entertain yourself with whether it's a show or a video game or whatever, it's hard to actually like enjoy it until it's finished, because by the time you're like part of the way through it, some other like AAA product, whether it's a movie or a game or whatever, has come out, and that's the big thing that everyone's playing now. And it's just like I want to be able to like sit and play a game for a few hours and then finish it, experience the joy of having completed a game. I think the last game that I actually completed was Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that only happened because I did what I would normally never do. I skipped a bunch of side quests and just went right to the end. Because there was just so many side quests. I was like, man, fuck, I'm never going to get through all of this shit.
Yeah. The side quests always seem tedious to me too. It's just like, I'm here for the story. I can't stick around. I don't know if you,
I don't know how old you all are, but I don't know if you remember the game Shenmue for Dreamcast.
He's the resident gamer.
Yeah, I call myself a gamer. No, I never played Dreamcast though.
Okay. I actually have like every game system going back to Sega Genesis. Shenmue was one of my favorites for a while. And then as an adult, I was like, man, They really fucking got okay. So a lot of like aspects of Shenmue's gameplay have been stolen piecemeal by other games that are now called sandbox games. But one of the things that just perplexed me about that game, like looking back to it, was one of the it wasn't a side quest. It was more like a mini game. There's a part of the game where your character Ryo, he's like this teenager who's trying to find his father's killer, but in the course of this game, he's not just like going from place to place to place, avenging his father. He's actually doing incredibly tedious things. He's walking around this town and asking people for clues and trying to find like a way to find the mysterious figure who killed his father. And one of the things that you end up doing is getting a full-time job at a warehouse. And this mini game is literally you in a fucking forklift getting an assignment list of boxes that you have to move from one side of the dock to the other side of the dock. And that's what you do. Now, the game time is accelerated, so you're not doing this for 8 human hours, but it's still a lot of your time. This fucked with my head, okay? I had a summer job working at a wings restaurant, and I would come home from the job at the wings restaurant to come home and do my job in fucking Shenmue. It was, when I think about it, I was like, I actually left a job to go do another fucking job, one that was paid and one that wasn't. And I paid for this game. I paid for this game to give me a job. I'm sitting in front of my TV, like holding a controller on the game, moving a box from one place of the map to another place of the map. It is the most bizarre fucking thing that as an adult, I'm like, that is the most perverse Skinner box that I could possibly imagine. But the funny thing about that is that that's how almost every game operates now. Games just give you jobs to do. And I don't want I want to experience a thing. I want to start a game and play through the narrative and finish it. Don't give me jobs. Just give me the fucking story. Just let me finish this game already. Jesus.
So the premise of this game is you're a salesman at a 9-to-5 job. The first real-time job experience.
Exactly, like Ace Attorney. Even though Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney isn't actually it's a good game, but it's like you're a lawyer. Like it's the premise of it is that you're actually participating in a parasitic vocation. Why would you want to do this? Why would you want to put any of your time into it?
And I don't know, I guarantee there are people that have put enough time into that game that could have just gotten a law degree and been making money off it and been a lawyer.
Yeah. So it's the same thing in, like, again, The Witcher 3. This is why I always forget what I'm doing, because it just gives me so many jobs to do. And it's like, I just want to play this game. And it's like, nope, in order to, like, get to this part of the story, you have to gain X amount of levels first. And in order to gain levels, you have to go do your side quests. And your side quests are like, go find this person, go into this castle and rid it of all the ghosts, or like go clear out the witches from this bog or whatever the fuck. And it's just like, I didn't buy this game to be given a job. I just want to finish the game. Let me finish the game. Damn.
Man, I clear ghosts from caverns all the time. Give me something new. Here, I'm gonna play something that has nothing to do with what we were just talking about, but it's it's something that I want to start doing with guests. So bear with me.
Okay. I don't know what's happening.
I don't hear anything.
I can't hear it.
Oh, you can't hear it?
No.
No.
Oh, no.
I'm just watching you two laughing.
Oh, God.
All right, hold on.
I'm like, are they fucking with me right now? Is that what you do with your guests?
That would be really funny if we just didn't play anything. Can you hear that?
I would like to give a warm thank you to our most recent donation by Kaylee. Kaylee is a long friend of the podcast, and our history brings us even deeper. To give the audience a little bit of insight and background, I met Kaylee during my long tenure at the Circus Emporium of Cabot, Vermont. You might have heard of the cheese, Cabot, Vermont, known for our cheese, known for our circus. Kaylee was a tightrope walker, one of the best. She studied under the Wallenda family. You don't know who that is? Go look it up, why don't you? The circus ain't no joke. It's a hard life out there in the tents. You got snakes, you got tigers, sometimes bears. Oh my! But Kaylee and I, we got by. We hung in there. And so here's to you, my goose in the sky. one of the best. Cheers.
So yeah, we have donors come in, and we have a fourth host that really hasn't been a part of the season because he got a second job, so he's been doing those instead. And so I just wanted to see what happened if we played that.
You got a second job working at a warehouse.
Yeah.
Well, it's either working at a warehouse or like hanging out with somebody who was trained by the Flying Walendas. So,
Yeah. How much do you know about the Walendas?
Not very much. Just that they were a circus act. I'm not really big on the history.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. Core E, do you have anything to polish off this episode?
Favorite
Andray,
type
you
of
were
cheese?
awesome.
Yeah.
Favorite type of cheese? Ooh, probably brie.
Plain kind of guy.
Say plain.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not very.
Yeah,
I'm not
he's
adventurous
pretty
with my
plain.
cheeses.
Do you like poutine?
I do. In fact, I like poutine very much, and not the regular kind of poutine that you get at Smokes Poutine Henri, but the actual poutine from Quebec. It has to be like Quebec poutine. You
Okay,
know?
I've heard that before.
Yeah,
So you're not going to get
outside
any.
of
You're not going to get
poutine
any in
outside
the
of
US.
Canada is a
yeah.
fucking abomination.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
If I don't know if there's any like poutine sellers outside of this country, or like major poutine sellers, but I have had poutine in the United States, and it just made me want to burn a flag.
Yeah, it's like a trendy bar food now. You know, like you've got pretzels with beer cheese, and then you've got chicken wings, and then you got poutine. And it's like they take French fries and they melt like some Kraft singles on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's terrible. I don't know what the fuck y'all are thinking.
Kraft singles make everything worse. That's not your favorite kind of
Except
cheese. huh?
Windows.
Except Windows.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, again, really appreciate you joining us. I know you're quite a busy guy right now, and probably the last thing you want to do after a nice busy day of work is just get really political and have to think hard about everything we're talking about. So,
No, it's all good. No, this has been a lot of fun.
cool. We appreciate being on, Andray.
Nice to meet
Thank
you.
you
We'll
very
see on
much.
Steam.
Yeah, nice to
Yeah.
meet you guys too. You take
Yeah.
it easy.
See you at the factory.
I'll see you. Bye.